Good afternoon, everybody. It's Kirk Lowe here from Top Advisor Marketing. Thank you for joining. My camera's been having some issues over the last week or so, and I have no idea why. I've tried lots of ways to fix it, so I am trying to share. It may come in and out, may freeze, but apparently everybody can hear me good as we test. We were testing this earlier in the weekend. We've tested again today here, and that should be good. Anyhow, we're going to talk today about 4 ways to fix your FrankenMarketing plan. And I don't know, whoever's here exactly what your marketing looks like, but it's not uncommon for me to, have been introduced to advisors over my 20-year career in financial marketing that have marketing plans in place that have kind of grown and evolved, and really they've been put together like a Frankenstein. And I think most advisors know that, but they've never been shown a better way. It's hard to, when you're running so many elements of a business, to step back and take a look at that, if that makes sense. So there's, and also there's a lot of different marketing people and experts, and I'll do quote unquote experts, that are giving advice on what you need to be doing. There's also people at the broker dealer that you work with. There's peers that you have that share stories about what they think will work or won't, or what they're doing, or what has or hasn't worked for them. And honestly, it's really a big kettle of stuff, right? There's pieces and bits and ideas and testimonials, opinions from lots of different places that are, hitting advisors as they try to grow their business, and particularly be good in different areas of your business, right? Not unlike any episode, presentation, white paper, article, or even social tweet that comes from my mind to you people, to you guys. Everything comes from an experience that I have trying to serve financial advisors, financial companies, professionals, occasionally CPAs, stuff like that. It's from being in the trenches with you guys. So I hope you appreciate that, these ideas are from a really positive place. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. The truth is that I've had a FrankenMarketing plan. I understand. I've lived this. We're constantly trying to get better and fix stuff, and that's part of being great at marketing. To be quite honest, is evolving. I'm going to ask you guys a question or make a statement, and I want you to really. I'd like you to embrace this as we go through this presentation today. And this came to me actually just yesterday. When you listen to marketing experts, do you look for what you want to hear or what you need to hear? And that's a challenge I have for you today. I was in a panel discussion 2 days ago with a mastermind group that has a lot of wonderful financial advisor professionals in it. And I got challenged by this idea, with this question, which I'm very open to being challenged on any of these things. And the question was, why would I spend, as an example, $60,000 over a couple of years on marketing some of the things that you talk about marketing, as in myself and my company? And the truth is that if you're in a business, you're trying to grow your business, first thing you want to do is you want to act like a business. And not being able to invest in marketing is not acting like a business. So I know that's harsh. It was a good question. I don't know if you agree with how I'm framing this back, but you have to think of your marketing like not just about business development outcomes. And I'm going to speak more to how to frame that in an upcoming episode on our podcast, Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. But today I'm gonna, I thought that was a decent kind of start to understand, to kind of lay the foundation of being open-minded about what this is, about thinking about marketing like you're a business owner. I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I just mean, we all have to be reminded of these things from time to time. So I'm going to dive into some of the things that we're going to talk about today. The idea of presenting this, and even the idea of what a FrankenMarketing plan was, the concept came to me actually about 3 or 4 months ago. An advisor I was speaking to shared with me a kind of like a back of a napkin drawing of their marketing plan. And I'm actually gonna, for the most part, I've changed the wording and stuff, but what I'm going to show you in a little bit here is actually their marketing plan. And I want to give you as an example of what FrankenMarketing, but the whole idea came from an experience that I had, talking to an advisor. Okay. So a couple things that we're going to want to talk about today, that I'm going to talk or teach you about, is I want you to think about marketing like you have a choice of who you actually want to work with and how you want to run your marketing. You have a choice. I feel sometimes, and I don't blame advisors, that it feels like an uphill battle trying to find the right ideas, the right plan, the right people to trust, to find the time to get it done, to find the budget, to have the outcomes that actually, will support the budget, on a sustainable basis. There's a lot going on there, but you absolutely have a choice to do this the right way. And hopefully I can share some ideas with you that'll get you started in a better direction. We're going to talk today about the 4-quadrant approach. So how to build around a marketing core and then add complementary pieces. That's how FrankenMarketing plans happen, is they don't have a core. They're just a whole bunch of pieces, right? And they're all sewn together, and it might think and feel like it's working, but oftentimes there's not efficiency. It doesn't look great. It's got gaps, holes, and it ends up being a Franken plan, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to help you enhance your call to actions by understanding how to tier your funnel, and also help you understand how to find and create synergy within your marketing plan. So I mentioned that you have a choice when you market to work with people that you really want to work with. I had a recent episode on my on Top Advisor Marketing podcast where I talked about quality versus quantity, and that's a massive mindset shift. It's a massive shift in marketing. I also shared recently on social media a quote from, actually that quote comes later, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll share that in a little bit. Anyway, you have a choice of who you work with. You want to work with people who may come into work, feel good, that you feel you're getting compensated fairly or well for, that are easy to work with, that you can add a lot of value to their world, and that you can build a sustainable business with. So when you find those people, market like you have a choice of working with only those people. And that's a great initial mindset to have. So I'm going to dive right into this FrankenMarketing plan. If you have a business and you have multiple focuses for how you market, who you market to, and your actual marketing strategy, that is very difficult to sustain. It's also very difficult to create synergy. It's very difficult to stay focused and be good at it because you're spreading yourself thin, resources, budget, time, effort, outcomes, attention, all those things. So this particular company had a company brand that was pursuing business owners 55 plus. They were also what I call, they had a side hustle or a niche hustle, which is way more targeted, which was Gen X high income earners who were tech pros, tech savvy, tech professionals. And they were marketing that as little known planning tactics. And I don't know if this advisor, they could happen to be here, but hopefully they'll get something out of this. Like I said, I'm not making fun of anybody. This is a reality. If you hear that weird noise in the background, that is my crazy male cat. He likes to cry when Mama leaves the house. Sorry. So the company brand here it's based on seminars. Really, everything's based on that. The email campaigns, the SEO are all driving them to try to. SEO is actually a little bit out of place here to a degree, because seminars is the big focus of working with the business owners. So they talk about it on their website. They have YouTube videos that lead back to to kind of pitch the idea of coming to seminars. Facebook is to try to get people to the seminars, and email as well. So there's a big focus on seminars. It seems to be the core. The thing about seminars is, or having this as a core, as everybody knows right now, seminars are difficult they're difficult to implement and get outcomes from right now. They're not the most efficient core for a marketing plan like this. So on the right here, we have Facebook ads, Google PPC. So there's not really a lot of synergies going on between those. It's an online course. There's no synergy. Can't send somebody from the niche hustle over to the company brand and vice versa. So you've lost a lot of synergy there. And there's email sequences to once people click on an ad or PPC and show some kind of interest, the email sequence goes out to try to get them to the online course. And then the online course has call to actions to come in for a consultation. So there's in each of these silos, if you will, there are a limited amount of engagement opportunities, right? It's basically this, go to the website, YouTube, learn about the seminar, go to the seminar, what happens after the seminar, like use email campaigns, SEO. So there's not a lot of options here. I mean, it looks like there are because they have a website and YouTube, but there's not a lot of engagement options. There could be more. They could be more efficient. They could work better together, things like that. On the right-hand side, there's even less. So I'm going to start working on a framework for everybody. So key learning points. You need more engagement. I should have gone to the slide first. Need more engagement options and better combinations. Need more consistent focus on a specific audience and a specific expertise, right? Because what you do for business owners likely going to be different than what you do for tech pros, different age groups, things like that. Needs more authentic content for credibility. So there's a little bit, the authentic content is in a course, which is a big commitment, and seminar, which is another big commitment. So you've got high-end, what I would call high engagement options, but not low engagement options. Sorry, not low engagement, low commitment engagements, right? So the high commitment engagements, way less people are going to click on those. Now, the reason that a marketer might tell you that's really important is because you only want to get people, what we call low-hanging fruit, right? People who emotionally might be ready to do that, but you're leaving out all kinds of people that could be amazing clients, right? So there's some inefficiencies there. And the last one is to tactics that can be leveraged in multiple ways to create synergy and efficiency. We need to get better at that. Those 4 ideas are really important components of having a great marketing plan. Lots of engagement options and better combinations, consistent focus on an audience and an expert and with a specific expertise. So who do you work with and how do you add value? And I've said this 100 times on my podcast and presentations. The more specific you can be about who you work with and what you do for them, the more value you can create than your competitors. Because if your competitors work with 10 different audiences and you only work with one, they can't compete with the value you provide. They'd have to do 10 times the amount of work, right, to get to where you're at. And it'd be confusing as can be when you engage in their marketing, right? Because which one of these people do you actually help? And you see everybody. So this can be really critical. A lot of advisors get freaked out by the idea of being more specific, but if you can find a really great niche, and specific isn't always, sometimes you think it being over or too specific, but find a bunch of criteria that you feel make somebody specific and you can identify and help them more. I'm not going to talk about niche marketing today beyond that. Sorry. So here's our 4-quadrant plan. This is a good framework to think about how you're going to organize your marketing and to make sure you've got marketing that's hitting each of these quadrants. Okay? The first one is attract, the second one's intrigue, the third one's engage, and the fourth one's influence. If you build this the right way, that middle symbol is supposed to say these things all work together, and they're all helping each other along the way. You need all four of them, and they all help each other. And that's where the synergy really happens. So you want to keep in mind as you're doing these, did they help the other areas? So the first one, attract. Who do you want to work with? We just talked about niche expertise, niche audience. Who do you help? Who can you help the most based on what you know? Who's accessible to you in your world? Where are they? Like, how do you find them? Are they people who are going to be on Facebook all the time? Are they going to be all over the place? Doesn't really matter. Are they part of an association? Are they part of a local area, a neighborhood, a couple of different companies, big companies? Are they a certain type of certain type of entrepreneur? Figure that stuff out. It's important. And how are you going to grab their attention? Where can you, what can you do to get their attention so that you can just make them pause for a couple seconds and think, maybe I should, dive into what this person have to say. So as soon as you can grab their attention, you have, and when you're pushing out to attract them, you need a story. You need some kind of hook, and it usually has to be about them, not about you. All about you sounds like everybody else typically. But if you make it about them, if you really understand them, really care about them, you'll make it about them. So is your message compelling? Can you make sure you stand out? The best way to stand out is to work for a specific group of people with a specific expertise. See how these things work together? Is your message integrated? So the example I was showing earlier, there was different messages depending on which campaign and who they were going after, right? So there was no integration or congruity there, congruence. So what you want to make sure that you have is that the same message is going out everywhere. One of our most successful and fun to listen to podcasters with our company, he has a message that he probably says 10 to 15 times every episode. And it's, you might think, oh my gosh, that's, just like one of those songs. I think one time when I was a teenager, I was a huge Billy Idol fan. I still enjoy listening to that stuff once in a while, but there was a song called White Wedding. I think it's White Wedding. And he says the same word so many times. And I counted one time, and I think it was over 40 times the same line in one song. And it was a big hit. Anyway, I don't worry about saying things over and over again if they're true to who you are and they differentiate you, right? So you want to have that message everywhere it can be. You want it to be consistent. That's a huge part of intriguing people. They want to know that all throughout your marketing, you're not going to shift. Like when they meet you and then all of a sudden you're not about that. You're selling them, you're selling them this product or that product. They want to know who you are, and you got to be that brand and push that message through everything you do. If your website says one thing and your social media profile says another, Facebook says one thing, LinkedIn says another. You've got to be integrated and you got to be consistent. I should have put consistent here too. My apologies. So that's really important about being. Actually, I've got that down the bottom right. So intrigue is really huge. You have to have a story. If you don't know how to come up with your story or you don't have one, you got to find somebody that can help you. There are lots of good people that can help you come up with a story. It's so much easier to do it with somebody helping you. Trust me. We're in the process of rebranding Top Advisor Marketing. Hope that doesn't freak anybody out. But we have plans to appeal differently in the future, not just to financial services. And so let the cat out of the bag here, but we're working on something. I did not attempt to do that myself. I've got 20 years of branding experience. We hired a firm, and it's an incredible experience. And so you don't, it's not always the best idea to try to figure this out for yourself, because it is very difficult to get out of your own way when you're trying to figure this stuff out. You got to be asked the hard questions. You got to have somebody challenge you to answer them properly. So think about that. The third quadrant here is engage. So when you attract people to what you're doing, you tell them a story that captures their attention, and they think, you know what, maybe I'll give them a little bit of my mind here. Maybe it's 10 seconds, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, a couple minutes. You've got to find a way to engage them. And that engagement is huge, because that's when they start to experience. This is where marketing really takes shape and hold with how you do it these days, which is, if somebody experiences your marketing and it was a good experience, that's like a first impression, right? And if you can have 20, 30, 50, 100 impressions that are all good, in other words, you're always trying to be helpful, smart, understand who they are and how they need to be helped, understand what they're going through and have solutions. Those things make a huge difference. And what happens there is they'll want to engage it more, right? So you want to have clear call to actions. That's what CTA means. You want to have tiered call to actions, and you want to have synergy. I'm going to get into each of these in a little more detail. I may be getting into them into too much detail on this slide, but anyway, I have a habit of getting ahead of myself in these presentations because I get excited talking to everybody. So influence, the fourth quadrant, is really about consistency. Can you consistently be out there and in front of people? I see this happen all the time. And a FrankenMarketing plan really hurts this box, because it's hard to be consistent when you're scattered. Budget, time, energy, you end up running out. And marketing is one of those things that often gets treated a little differently than other things in your business. And so it may be the first thing to lose your attention, that you don't pay attention to. So consistency is huge. It's a huge part of developing a brand and trust. And if you start and stop your blog every 6 months because you ran out of time to write an article, that's a big problem. That's actually why we started our podcasting service and our micro-influencer program. Because we had a lot of advisors who were trying to start blogs and they couldn't create any consistency. I was pulling my hair out. I've got none left. And finally, Matthew Howland and I met, tried a podcast for ourselves, and a light bulb went off that this is the answer for advisors. Anyway, it's been the answer for the advisors that we're working with and helping, not necessarily everybody. But the concepts of why a podcast work or a blog or video are that it's the core. It builds the relationship on content and your expertise, right? So another part about being influential is being valuable. If you're valuable for a week and then you stop putting the effort in to be valuable, people will take notice. So you got to be consistent. You got to be consistently valuable too, and you got to be everywhere. You got to be everywhere that your clients are. You really can't say that all my target audience they only hang out on Facebook. It usually doesn't work like that. Some people prefer Facebook, some Instagram, some LinkedIn, some Twitter. They all have, it just depends on what they're interested in. So you want to be in as many places as you can. You want to make sure that you have an email presence too. You want to make sure that your website's coordinated with all the social channels, all that stuff. If you can be in as many places as possible, if you can show up on other people's podcasts, you can have your own podcast, write your own blog, get your articles published in community papers or larger papers. When I say papers, I mean, online websites, stuff like that. Be as many places as you can. It's actually not nearly as much work as you think it is to get in those places once you get started. The biggest challenge is having a coordinated marketing plan and having that core content. Once you get that core content done, everything else becomes easier. I've really already answered all these. I knew I was going to do that. So I'm gonna go through these, pass by these because I already spoke to each of them, and then we will come back and we can talk about them. You guys can ask me questions. I know you have great questions, which will actually add even more value to the presentation. So this is an idea of cleaning up, using some of what we heard in those past 4 slides, right? I'm going to go back to those. I'll go back to the big one more time so everybody can see it. And I will make these slides available to everybody so you can have them. And we'll also do a replay. Attract, intrigue, engage, influence, right? So we're applying these things: who, where, tactics, compelling, specific, integrated, clear call to actions, tier call to actions, synergy, consistent, valuable, and be everywhere. So it's no surprise that I threw podcast in there, seeing as that's what we do. But you could have video there, you could have blog, you could have other things in there. But I think for me, writing, doing video, or audio are three of the best ways. They're all relatively intimate. Obviously, video and podcasting are more intimate. I think podcasting is the most intimate because of the length. People will probably pay attention and where they're listening to them, which is in their own private space, right? 72% of people engage in or listen to a podcast on their own time. So whether they're commuting to or from work, while they're walking their dog, making dinner, things like that. So video doesn't happen quite as intimately, but it's because you can see somebody, it has its own, additional value there. So I find that, those two are the most prominent as far as engagement and intimacy. Blogging can be. Blogging is good for people who really want to get through stuff really quick because they can scan an article and enjoy that, which is why if you're doing a podcast or doing a video, you always want to have content to support it, not just the video and not just the audio, right? So, which lends perfectly well into getting into this idea. So if you've got a podcast, one of the things that you're going to want to do is cut that up into little pieces, right? Clips, maybe take a quote from it, and share that through social media. Share the original, share the snippets as well. And now you've got content for social media that's unlike most content that most advisors have, which is purchased from a content library, which may or may not resonate with your audience, which is written by one person for many. It's not always niche oriented. It's not going to have your personality or your style or your flair, right? Might not even have all the ideas. I find this is another thing that's interesting. A lot of financial advisors use content from a content library that they might not actually agree with all the points in it, but they didn't have time to read it. Or they hired a social company just to fire out stuff on their social channels so they look busy. There's no substitute for having your own expertise going out on your own social channels and any way you're going to distribute it through email. There's no substitute. You can go buy a campaign from a company, the paper and a seminar and all that stuff. There's no substitute for this. Those things can have a place and can work if they work with your audience and they work with your content. But you got to find a way to create authentic content to showcase that you're the expertise. That scares some advisors because some advisors feel like maybe they're not as much of an expert as they need to be. But that's a good opportunity for you to get better at your craft. And I've never met a financial advisor or business person, including myself, that hasn't become a much better professional by pushing out their own content. It makes you better. It makes you better understand your clients. It makes you better understand how you communicate. It challenges yourself to go find ideas. It's a wonderful experience as a professional who wants to learn and get better. So when you're using social media, you can use call to actions to get people to go to different tiered stuff. And I'll show you the other tiered stuff here in a minute. But you can see everything centers around one thing, right? The podcast. You can create other things on the side, like you can have a video. The video can help improve what you do on Facebook ad or Google search. That can drive people back to your podcast. The podcast can then be distributed through social media, which attracts more people. You can get them to come to a webinar or meet you. Then people might sign up for a course. And there's an email sequence which drives them back to your website. On the website, they realize you've got a podcast. They want to listen to more of your podcast. And eventually they hear an idea and the time in their world is right. and you've got this system that just keeps playing off itself, right? The video works on social, the podcast works on social, the video drives traffic back to the podcast drives traffic to the video, the webinar, you've got a bigger email list. There's so many neat things going on here, and they're all synergistic. There's not one thing on here that works in a silo or that doesn't help multiple pieces in this marketing plan as an idea. I know it's the arrows are here. I'm not trying to confuse you. Just the idea is that this is how things flow, right? And there's both. So there's a lot going on here, I know, but the idea here is to create synergy. So I'm going to talk to you. This is probably one of the more confusing things when you decide you want to get better at this stuff. So I've broken it down, and this is really into some industry standard terminology here. So the tofu, mofu, and bofu, they're lots of fun. They're pretty easy to remember. Tofu stands for top of the funnel. Middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. Top of the funnel is based on awareness. How do we get people to engage, their first engagement or multiple engagements? And the thing you want to do here is you want to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes to something that you're doing. If you've got a private webinar or seminar, that is what we would call a bottom of the funnel conversion type tiered activity or tactic. If that's all you have, a lot of people are going to say no. You're missing all the stuff at the top of the funnel, in the middle of the funnel. You haven't built a relationship with anybody, so you're going to have skeptics show up at your event instead of fans. Who wants skeptics at their events? You'd much rather have fans, right? That's one of the things that I'd like to see get a lot better with seminar marketing, and I know it's happening. I know because all the seminar marketing companies that we're talking to and people are doing seminars who are using a podcast to warm an audience or using a blog or something like that. How do we get credibility before you set foot in there? And not just with a couple of bullet points on an invitation, right? So what you want to do is focus on having all three of these tiers. In the best case scenario, you have at least 2 items in each of these. I would say it's more important to have more at the top than at the bottom, if that makes sense. So, do you have a podcast, video, newsletter, website? 4 or 5 of those would be good. Do what you can. Never bite off more than you can chew, but have a good plan that does all the interact, intrigue, engage, influence, and start building off of it, right? So tofu, blog, podcast, video, article, landing page, newsletter, infographic, website. So if you want to have a good chunk of those. And find stuff that you can consistently do and stick to it, but get a couple of those going. As you can imagine, a website is good, but it's not going to be a game changer for you. And a website and infographic, you need more than that too, right? So you got to figure out, you got to have at least one of the things going on in the left column and probably 2 to 4 in the right. But you got to have at least one on the left. Does that make sense? So the middle of the funnel is when these are really call to actions that happen in your top of the funnel tactics. So your blog should push them to a checklist, a course, a paper, a book, an on-demand webinar, an on-demand event or video, a webinar or a seminar. Make sense? So you want to use stuff at the top to get them to go. Now, at the top, you don't just want to use middle of the funnel. Top of the funnel can also point to other top of the funnel things. And that can be really powerful. Get them experiencing your podcast, your video, an article you wrote. Get them signed up for your newsletter. Make sure they go to your website. Check out your an infographic on your process for how you work with people, or the life cycle that there's all kinds of life cycle that they're in their world. There's all kinds of neat things that you can do. Sorry, I didn't mean life cycle, I meant life events. So there's all kinds of neat things you can do at the top of the funnel. Get them bouncing around there a bit, and then have a secondary call to action on those pieces that drive them to a checklist, to the middle of the funnel stuff. And then when they're in the middle of the funnel stuff, how do you get them to the bottom of the funnel? You see in between all these funnels, the segregation in the funnels, we've got social media, right? Use social media to move them from one to the next. Use PR or publicity to move them from one thing to the next, and use email. So there's tools that you can use. They're typically distribution tools that you can use to move them from one thing to the next. So you want to make sure you have those things in place, or at least one, or at least two of those. Most people are going to start with social media and email, but PR can be extremely powerful. Just imagine how powerful PR is when you get all this stuff happening. Think of how many advisors you see, or how many businesses you see who have a call to action on PR but don't have anything else to support it. You go to their website and like, they seem like they were an expert when they were talking, or maybe they didn't because they had no story or no niche, right? They're just talking on TV, or or in video, or quoted in a newspaper, or quoted in a website article or a magazine, something like that. I mean, who knows? But you want to make sure that if you're doing those things, you've got all the support behind you, right? You want to make sure that you've, a FrankenMarketing plan. In a FrankenMarketing plan, most of the items in there don't perfectly support other things. And there's a lot of waste that happens. So when you're in the middle of the funnel, your checklist, your course, your paper, your book, you want to go from the checklist to the course, from the checklist to the paper, or vice versa. But then you also want to say, well, sign up for our webinar, something like that, or a seminar, or come to a private meeting. Let's go for a coffee. Let's do a Zoom call. I can give you a free consultation. So you want to move around between them. But in each of the funnels, you want to get them bouncing around there. And then you want to have basically two call to actions if you can, to move them to the next level, next tier, and then same thing, bounce them around in each funnel, and then try to move them to the next tier. Hopefully that makes sense. I get speaking fast and I need to slow down with you guys. So the reality of the funnel approach, or understanding the funnel and how it applies to your marketing plan, is that the engagement is escalating as you go through the funnel, right? As you go from the top to the bottom, the amount of engagement and the type of engagements are escalating, right? They've gone from reading your blog post to reading a paper to enrolling in a course, or printing out a checklist and talking to their spouse about it, to watching or signing up for a webinar, to calling you to go for a coffee, if that makes sense. Some of these things may be better, in the bottom of the funnel than the middle of the funnel, depending on how you want to use them. So don't get too caught up in, the events. It was kind of difficult for me because events can really be, probably most of the time, they're going to be at the bottom. But I find like an on-demand seminar is not a huge engagement, because they can just watch it on their own time. It's not really much different than a course. So the reason it's a higher commitment is because an on-demand webinar is typically longer, so they know they're going to have to be spending some time with you. Videos up here in Tofu should be like 30 seconds to 3 minutes at most, right? They should be quick sound bites. And I just want to make sure that was clear. So if you can lead everybody through here, you're going to have a much better marketing plan in place to create the business and the marketing that's going to move your business forward, be sustainable, be something you can be proud of, that's efficient from a budget and time perspective, and one that keeps building momentum. You always want to be thinking about doing as much marketing as you can that builds momentum. What I mean by that is, when you're at month 3, or let's say when you're at month 6, your marketing is worth way more than it was at month 3. And the same thing at month 12, it's worth way more than it was at month 6. So it just, more content, more episodes, more videos, more blog posts, more variety, more depth, greater omnipresence, right? Your stuff is getting shown in more places. You're starting to show up on other people's websites and places, and you can publish that on your social media channels. So-and-so, asked me to come on their podcast. So-and-so asked me to do a webinar for them, things like that, right? So there's a lot of opportunities that come from this that build momentum. And that momentum marketing philosophy is a huge thing for you guys to overcome, to get to. If you're spending money on marketing that isn't worth more at month 6 than it was at month 3, you don't want the most of your marketing to be that. You can still do that. Ads are like that. When you do a Facebook spend and the money's gone and the ad's done, it's done, right? There may be some residual awareness, but because you're not a company with a mega $1 million budget and following, you're not likely to get as much out of that awareness as you'd like. You have to keep on top of them all the time. So you want to think about that. The key to this whole plan and this whole mindset is content. Content is your core. And if you're going to have content as the core of your marketing, it needs to be authentic, right? It needs to be you. If it's somebody else's content, it's just going to have a different impact. You don't control it. It doesn't have any personality. It's not necessarily what you're going to talk about or use the same words when you're in a meeting with people, and they're going to see through that. There's a great quote by Seth Godin. I'm guessing most of you have heard of Seth Godin. He's one of the dominant marketing minds over the last 15 years. And back in 2008, he said this. That's 12 years ago. Content marketing is the only marketing left. And how many of us are spending the time, effort on thinking about our marketing as content marketing? And how can you do content marketing well if you don't have your own content, if you're not portraying yourself as the expert? So I've been going on here. I want to give everybody a chance to ask some questions. My apologies for my video not showing up. I'm pretty frustrated by it, but I'll try not to share that frustration with you guys. So Jen, I'm just wondering if there's any questions for us here.
There's no real questions, but David did write that he has no problem attracting. It's the intrigue that has always escaped him. Yeah. Maybe you could just touch on that again, just to give him some highlights to end this webinar with.
Yes. So the thing about intrigue is it's a really challenging thing to do all on your own. So unless you can find somebody, and really that's about your positioning, your brand, your audience, how are you going to frame what you do? And most importantly, what you do for them, like how you solve things. Do you even understand what's going on in their world? How do you solve it? And the other thing that's really challenging for financial services is that to a degree, a lot of advisors have the same brand. They do, and there's been a lot of work to get. So what ends up happening is it kind of feels sometimes like your brand might be somebody else's. That's why you got to have somebody help you find out what's unique about who you are, right? Who really do you really love serving, and who really loves you, most importantly, right? Who really loves what you do? Can you duplicate those or replicate those people? Because that'll make for a great business when you can figure that out. And I find it's not easy to do that on your own. I'll be honest, the last couple of company names, brands, have been epiphanies I've had talking to people who have been partners or mentors and have given me a new perspective on what we're doing. That oftentimes shapes the brands that I even do for my own company. And sometimes we're so busy, we to a degree, we have blinders on. So you need to find somebody that can help you through that. If you want to send me an email, we do some of this. So I can help you with that. But you really need, there's lots of people that are helping with branding. And to be honest, I find there's a lot of good people that do branding. So if you need help, reach out and I'll try to give you some ideas. But look for how you're going to figure that out. You could be reading a book, taking a course, things like that, or hiring a company to do it. Okay. I would love for some more. I'd love for some more questions if you guys have any.
Kirk, can you talk about the ideas for actual podcasts, episodes, guests, etc.?
Yeah. if you decide that podcasting is the content core that you want to work with, it could be multiple things, by the way. I mean, you can use video and podcasting as your content, or as your core, sorry. You want to have, there's a lot of different ways to run a podcast or develop a podcast. You can have a lifestyle podcast that doesn't even talk about financial planning. You could invite local businesses to talk about their success and not talk about financial planning. I mean, you can inject it once in a while, but you can just talk about life. You could go to and we've got episodes about this on Top Advisor Marketing. I'm trying to think of the word we use to describe it there. I think we call it 12 by 20, something like that. If you happen to find that episode, Jen, if you know what I mean, it's that the tactics for podcasting tactics. Actually, if you go to our podcast page, so if you go to Top Advisor Marketing, in the top right it says podcast. When you go to those episodes, if you put in tactics, you'll probably find the podcast tactics. I think it's 9 or 10 of them. But another one of them is something we call a 12 by 20. And what you do, the idea there is pick 12 clients who have really engaged in a hobby. So maybe that hobby is yachting, maybe it's flying airplanes, maybe it's scuba diving, maybe it's yoga, right? Maybe it's coaching a sports team for kids, whatever it happens to be. Go to those clients who you know are really into something and find the person that they admire most in that hobby, and get those people to come on your podcast, talk about how, what they know and what they learn, and advice for other people who may want to pick that up or who are dabbling in it and don't know as much as they could. And then what you do is you say to the expert who you brought on and the client who introduced you, do you know 20 people in each of your circles that are into this that you can share this episode with? Right? So that's a great tactic to meet potentially 40 new people. So 20 people, they introduce you to 20 people each, and you go find 12 people. Doesn't really matter how many you find, but when you multiply 12 by 40 or 12 by 20 times 2, each of those people, that's a lot of new people to meet. Right? So there's a lot of neat tactics there. As far as ideas for your podcast, it should be stuff that, like I was saying earlier, what experiences do you have with clients where you could have done a better job, or you wish you had something they could have listened to so you didn't have to explain it in every meeting? Some of the best success stories that I hear from our clients are about people coming to them and saying, you don't have to explain how you work. I'm ready to go. I've listened to your podcast on what you do, how you do it. I listened to the series of 3 on estate planning. I need estate planning. You don't need to talk to me. I'm already sold. Just how do we work together? When do we start? That's a crazy place to be for a lot of advisors. I'll be honest, that happens to us because of our podcast and thought leadership that we share. It's a big deal when you can get there. It's a lot of fun. And if you can create a system to go more and more, it's wonderful. Anyway, I'm kind of off topic a little bit. But the episode should be experiences that you have with clients. When you could have done a better job educating them before they asked that question, or what you said to them in the meeting, that would have been maybe, a lot of other people want to know, but they're not meeting with you. So how do you get that out there? So what I suggest is a couple things. One is, you've always got a mobile device or a notepad on you, right? Your mobile device is your notepad. Or some of you may actually carry a little notebook. Every time you think of something that you wish you could have done better, or you wish your client knew, write that down. Then another idea is to go to our website. So at the top of the website, it says Influencer Academy. Click on that and check out the different sections. I better do this for you so I send you to the right place. But one of those sections has information, on how to write a white paper, or how to create a like an outline for an ideas for writing an article or a paper or something like that. They're really the same idea. One's just longer and more detailed. But if you want to think of topics to write about, think about what's going on. So what's going on in their world? What's the problem? Describe the problem or obstacle. I'm kind of getting into other webinars here as David is pushing the limits of the topic here, which he loves to do, by the way. I'm saying that in a fun-hearted manner. So the first one is describe their problem, describe what it must feel like, and for people that for them and for other people you work with, and then tell them some ideas on how to solve it. Maybe even point them to resources, or tell them what resources that you have. I don't mean sell them. I mean give them ideas on how to solve. One of the biggest inhibitors to financial advisors being great at content marketing is they're not generous with their expertise. If you want to be great at content marketing and create value, you have to share everything you know. You can't hold it back. I know there's compliance limitations with what you can and say and advice you can or can't give, but you should be given as much as you can. There's no way other people are going to pick up and do a better job of what you're doing or explain it the way you do. So stop worrying about other advisors stealing your stuff. Just blow them away every minute. If they don't know what you know, they're not going to catch up. Just keep going. Keep expanding your horizon. They'll always be chasing you. And believe me, the clients that you want to work with will understand that, because you've had consistent marketing and you're hitting them all the time with your ideas and your expertise. You will win the long game easily. You'll win the mid game. No, you shouldn't worry so much about the short game. So those are really, hopefully those are a couple of good ideas on how that happens. And by the way, the Buffalo Bills are a really good chance. So the next question is, will the Buffalo Bills win the Super Bowl this year? I don't know if there's going to be a Super Bowl this year, but if there is, it's probably going to be the Steelers. I'm not from Pittsburgh, but that is my team. But I must say, I love the Bills because they're a small market and they're a top team again. It's always fun to see the underdogs winning, right?
For sure.
Yeah. That's part of this marketing concept too, is marketing like an underdog. Like finding really efficient ways to compete with bigger companies, more advisors, even advisors maybe that have bigger budgets and more successful practices. Figure out how to beat them. Create your own content. Really hard to compete with you when you're perceived as the expert. Anyway, any other questions, feel free to ask them. I'll stick around for another minute or two if there's any.
I do not see any questions, Kirk, but just want to make sure that everybody takes note. I did add your Calendly link if anybody would like to set up an appointment with you just to talk some of this stuff out, as well as the link to episode 162, 7 podcast tactics.
Sorry, I cut you off. Can you grab Matthew's? I'll grab Matthew's. And Matt, it's actually a better idea to meet with Matt. He's trying to take all these calls from webinars and such.
Okay.
We both stay in our lanes here. So I'm still, I don't want to turn anybody away from talking to them, but Matt's going to be doing more of this. So we'll throw Matt's in here in a second here if you want to wait around for another second. Sorry about the delay. That's my fault. I did not inform Jennifer of that, which is why I kept trying to cut you off so I didn't make you waste. Sorry. So here it is. I've got it, Jen.
Okay.
There we go. So that's that's Matthew. The last one I put in there is Matthew Halloran's Calendly link, and that's for a 45-minute or less call with him. Okay, you're welcome to email us, Kirk@topadvisorm.com or Matt with two T's, so MATT at topadvisorm.com. Just let us know that you were on the FrankenMarketing webinar, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And please, if you haven't already, listen to our podcast. That's where Matt and I chat about a lot of things. We cover a bit here, but we cover a lot more on our podcast. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And all the best in your non-Franken marketing plan. We'll talk to you real soon. Oh, David wants a success story from a client. You're really driving the call here. Beautiful. So I'll tell you a story about our first podcaster. We had 4 podcasters that all signed up at the same time. Those are our first 4 clients ever. Always grateful for them saying yes, because it really felt like that time where you introduce something new and you really got to have somebody to believe in you. And I'm extremely grateful that all 4 did. The first one is an advisor in New York, and he was a former CPA. So he loved building relationships with CPAs. So his strategy or tactic was to have guests on his podcast. And this was another tactic you can use. And we talked about having business owners on. We can have peers on, like center of influence. There's that work with people that you want to work with. So he was inviting on CPAs once a month. He was doing 2 podcasts a month. So once a month, it was him, and the other time it was a guest. I think actually sometimes he did 2 guests a month because he was really focused on that. So the idea was, how do I build all these relationships? And a lot of people he was asking weren't saying no, and they were delighted, because the introduction to a new center of influence was, hey, I love what you do. I know maybe it's a CPA. He may have asked his clients who their CPAs are, and then gone to them. I know so-and-so works with you, has had a lot of nice things to say. I'd like you to come on my podcast and talk to my audience, and then you can share that with your audience when you're done. And we can figure out what you're going to talk about that's going to be meaningful to both of our audiences. And that's a wonderful way to start a relationship, right? You doing something really nice for somebody else. The podcast is so professional that it makes them look good. Not a lot of people have a podcast in the industry, so it helps you stand out. And then when people listen to one podcast, by the way, they usually listen to 3 or 4 more. So people typically listen to about 4 podcasts. They binge listen. It's actually why when we release podcasts, when we syndicate to iTunes as an example, we wait till the 4th episode is there, because iTunes will give you, they won't let your stuff be seen as much if it doesn't have 4 when you launch, because they know people want to binge listen and they want to give them the opportunity to do that. So so the first 12 months, after 12 months, we had a meeting. Sorry, my stories are always longer than they need to be. That's part of my charm, if you don't know. So the 12 months happens, and we're meeting, and hey, Kirk, I'm a little worried. I don't have anything. I'm not a lot worried. I'm a little bit worried. Haven't had any direct business from this. But it's going well. It feels good. It feels right. People are really, a lot of people are saying yes. So I've got a lot of, engaged centers of influence. So that's really good. But I don't have anything to show for it yet. Well, we didn't expect any results in 12 months for this kind of approach. So let's keep going. 18-month mark. Hey, Kirk, still don't have any business. I'm not really worried, but I'm a little more worried than I was at the 12-month mark. Just hang in there. Let me ask you this though first. Is there more momentum in your business? Absolutely. In fact, I've been asked twice, once to be on a TV show and once I was quoted in an article, something like that. Don't quote me on that if you're listening, Mr. Original Client. But it was something like that. So then after the 18-month mark, I hadn't heard from a while. We got busy. We're growing. He does have other people who communicate with me, but it's not me on a regular basis. And at the 30-month mark, he called and said, we got to talk. I said, perfect. I love talking to him. What's going on? Well, I just did 30 million in assets in the last 12 months. And that is so fantastic. He was so excited. I think he's mostly excited because I think when you're a financial advisor, it's really hard sometimes finding partners that care a lot about your business and have a good strategy and kind of see you through it. And for me, that was gratifying to know that, that he had built this trust with us over time, even though things weren't always going the way he wanted. He was patient, and things really worked out for him. I'm not suggesting that, the disclaimer here is that this is the same for everybody, because it hasn't been, but it can be. So what I mean by that is, if you put the effort in and you stick to it and you listen to all the little things that we ask you to do, the organic things that you can control, let us do our job, good things can happen in content marketing. It doesn't have to be with us, but content marketing can really work, because the relationships that he built, when those center of influence, one of the things that happens with center of influence is they typically are slow to reciprocate, because they want to make sure that if they're ever going to do anything, you're going to make them look good, because they never want to refer a client, have that client be upset, and then lose a client, right? You guys can all appreciate that. You would never want to refer a CPA and then have a client have a bad experience and say, look, you referred, I'm out of here, right? So that's part of the reason people don't want to refer across, those professions. But this worked out tremendously. As you can imagine, he's paid for a lifetime of marketing all in 1 year, right? So that's for me, that's one of my favorite stories. Some of the other ones are people coming at the office, like I mentioned in the middle of this presentation, people who didn't have to sell, advisors who didn't have to sell because people listen to their podcast and were already sold. Attracting the kind of people that are exactly the kind of people we want to work with as another common story we hear. People who hadn't referred in a long time, all of a sudden inspired to refer, because now it's easier to refer you when you've got a podcast, right? Before it was refer you to a meeting or a phone call. Now you can refer a prospect to a podcast, and then those people have a chance to, engage in your system, right? So podcasting and good marketing make it a lot easier for your marketing to work, and for you to build relationships and build more of a long-term, midterm, long-term machine for your business, right? So anyway, that was a long webinar. I don't know how many stuck around, a couple of you.
Yeah, there's still some here.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And David, we're going to have to send you a t-shirt or something like that for being such a good student today. We did not have that plan, but you're gracious. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And I look forward to hearing from you guys in the future. All the best, everybody.